Hey everyone, welcome to another tech video. Now, if you guys haven't seen my previous video with the intro to Linux and particularly PC Linux and why I started using Linux, it'll be in the description down below. So for today, I just want to do a quick pros and cons to using Linux. So let's get started. So we're going to start with the pros first and then the cons. So here we go. Number one, and probably the best part about using Linux is, yes, there you go. Oh yes, it's free. Linux is free to use under the GNU public license. You can look that up or Google it, or maybe I'll leave you a description there somewhere. And under the GNU license, it's 100% free, and also it's free to use and to develop on your own. That is why there's so many distros, which we will get to in another pro. It's always free. 100% free. Free as in gratis. And who doesn't love free stuff, right? You know the old saying, some of the best things in life are free. And so Linux is free to use. There are different versions that, some of them you have to make a donation, or some of them that if you want to use a more robust or professional version of different distros, you might have to pay a small fee. But so far, all of the ones that I have downloaded and tried out, they're all free. So that's one of the best, and I'm going to say the number one part about using Linux is free. You'll never have to pay every time there's a new version of your distro or operating system. You'll never have to pay like you do in Apple and Windows, where whenever there's a new version, you're going to have to pay for the license to use that operating system and to be able to download it or use it on your computer. Linux is always free. Okay, so here we go. Pro number 2. Variety. There's always different types of Linux distros available. So there's going to be some you'll find a free version, number one, free, that will suit your taste to what you want to use it for. So if you haven't saw my previous video on Intro to Linux, there's different versions of Linux. And the Linux kernel itself is so versatile that if you're using Android, you're using Linux. If you're using which I forgot to mention in my previous video, that if you're using a Chromebook, a Google Chromebook, that's also a version of Linux. So you can basically use it for just the basic things like surfing the internet or the surfing the internet, the web, or as an entertainment system like you do with your PlayStations and your what is that one? The NVIDIA Shield. I think it uses Linux also. To, something like an operating system they have in Linux for professional, like photography or videography. So there's different ones, and the best place to go to is right here on distrowatch.com. And what you would do when you go to Distrowatch is you're going to go right there to the bottom right corner, which we'll focus on in here. Okay, so here we are on the bottom right corner of the Distrowatch page, and here is where you can look at all the different distros. Distros are just different versions of your Linux operating system, as I've said before. And on this bottom right corner, it'll tell you right here where these Linux distros fall into as far as their rank and popularity. And then also here on the very far right, you got how many hits did they get per day. And so they're either trending up or down with the green arrow right there, or right here with Elementary OS, it's trending down. Now as you can see here, there are, it goes up to 100 different flavors or distros or versions of Linux, but there are so much more than that. And some of these are very specialized for either like I said, running a server. You could run a gaming system, but we'll get into that later on. And also like if you have a very, very old like computer with like, very old or ancient hardware, like say like your AMD K6s or something like that, with very old, like really old stuff, you'll find a very light Linux distribution that you can use to revive an old computer, and maybe like give it away for donation or to charity, so that someone else who doesn't have a computer could learn to use a computer. So that's the beautiful thing about Linux. So I went to here to show you guys like what these different distributions desktops look like. So I'm gonna pick 3 of them in particular, because I think there's right at the time that I'm doing this, there's 3, I believe, maybe more, but I think it's 3. There's a KDE, which is a different desktop version, a version of the Linux desktop. Then there's Mate, which is a derivative of GNOME. Mate, and then there's I think XFCE or something. There's different ones, but the most popular ones right now would be KDE, GNOME, and Mate, and then Ubuntu's version, which is called Unity. Show you what the different desktop environments look like so you can get a good idea. So I'm going to pick these 3 in particular. Mint, Ubuntu, Elementary, because they're probably gonna, and maybe this one right here is Zorin, because Zorin, I believe, is pretty much one of the easiest to get to if you want to, because it emulates its desktop to look just like Windows. So I'm gonna run some videos for you guys to see. There's mine right there, PC Linux OS, but I won't do that because pretty much PC Linux OS will kind of look like whatever the Mate desktop looks like in Ubuntu or Mint. So we're just gonna go with these 4 right here. We're gonna go with Mint, Elementary, and Zorin. So here we go. So here's what the latest version of Linux Mint, I think the latest version is 18. This is what the desktop looks like right there. And there's Linux Mint and how the menu system looks like. And this is for Linux Mint 18 Mate Edition. Okay. So here is Ubuntu's Unity desktop, what it looks like. And you can see it's a little different. You got all the menu system and your most used apps right there on the far left corner. And It's a pretty plain and open desktop. So you click one of the buttons, one of the things that'll pop up is like some of the most used apps, and also, you can get to your web browser and things like that. And I kind of have my PC Linux desktop set with the second side panel, like what it has in Unity. Here is a demo of Elementary OS desktop, and as you can see, it looks kind of like Mac OS. And this is also running, I think, Mate. So even the different desktop environments, you can make them look and customize them to look a certain way. Like this one right here, Elementary, looks like Mac a little bit. Actually, there's another one. Let me go to that one. Here's another desktop, Linux desktop environment based off of an Arch Linux derivative called Apricity OS. And as you can see, it's a little bit like Apple's, but it also kind of looks like the Google Chrome or your Chromebook operating system. So here's another version of another distro. This is Zorin OS. And Zorin, as you can see, looks almost exactly like Windows. And there's two versions of Zorin. There is a free version and there's a paid version, like it's called Ultimate. So there we have it right there on Pro number 2 for using Linux. There's a variety. The saying, variety is the spice of life. I mean, why would you want to eat the same foods every day or wear the same clothes every day, right? There's always a different version of Linux, and like I said, most of them are for free that you can download and use, and find the one that you like the best that suits your usages or for what use that you want to use it for, and then download it, install it, and that's it. Like I said, there's so many different versions of Linux, and most of them are all free. So that is that is Pro number 2 for using Linux. So now let's get to number 3. Pro number 3, you don't ever have to run antivirus, anti-spyware, security software from Linux. All you have to do is when you have Linux installed is to run a firewall, and that's about it. I really don't have an antivirus software for mine. Just not like in right here. This is what I was using for when I had Windows. I was using ESET. ESET's I think it's Security Suite, and you can see right there how much you have to pay per year to use your different antivirus. This is from ESET, one of the best as far as like AV testing and stuff like that, antivirus testing organizations. And here you have Norton, and look how much you have to pay for these. Okay, so you never have to run an antivirus. Here's another popular one, McAfee and Norton. McAfee and Norton, and sometimes this one right here, Kaspersky. Some of these are pre-installed on your PCs that you buy, your laptops, desktops, and people forget that when they have these installed on most of your computers, that they're not totally free. They're like a free 90-day or 30-day trialware, and after that you have to pay for the license. If you don't, you won't get no updates, and if you don't get the updates to the latest virus definitions, that's how you catch a virus. I've had a lot of friends and clients, notebooks and desktops, get some kind of malware just because when they bought their PC, they haven't paid for the full version, so they weren't getting the updates. So then I had to try to fix their computers for them by removing and finding out what they had or what kind of viruses. So like I said, you never have to run any more antivirus or pay for antivirus. Now I know there's some stuff like in Windows that are free, like right here, AVG. There's a free and a paid version. I think Avast has a free and paid version also. But with Linux, like I said, you don't ever have to worry about paying or using an antivirus software. So that's pro number, I think that was 3. So those are my top 3 for why I use Linux, but there's others that you can't really see, like Linux is more stable. You'll never hardly ever get any crashes in Linux. It's easier to use now than it's ever been. So like I said before, if you can use Android, you can use Linux. What else? Okay, I'm just going to go here to one of these websites to reasons for using Linux. Like I said in the first part, it's free. It's Linux is secure. It's lightweight and fast. Remember I said you could use it with older ancient hardware. It's efficient and robust. Like I said, it's very stable. It's open source, so you can use it free. You can develop it. It's very customizable, like I said. And it's clean and clutter free. When you use Linux, what do they call that? Filing system, like Windows has NTFS. You also never have to use a defragmenter in Linux. Everything is efficient, and there's really no need to use a defragmenting software in Linux. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. Linux is easier than you think. There you go. It enables booting from USB in the Linux community, provides plenty of support that you don't have to pay for like you do in some other operating systems. And here's another one. It's free, right? Everybody loves free. More secure, no need of antivirus. Compatible with lower end hardware, I said that. Ease of use, drivers already included inside the kernel. It's sexy and you know it. That's the different desktop environments and your customizability. There's software repositories, better updating process, and yeah, community support. So those are all the pros. Now some cons. Okay, now we're going to get into the cons. So one of the cons, when I first started using Linux, and it was a big one back then, but not so much anymore, is games. You can't run Linux, or there's not a lot of the latest or most popular game titles if you're a gamer on Linux. Back when I first started using Linux, I think in early 2012 or 2010. But now there's more compatibility. There's a special Linux operating system based off of Ubuntu called SteamOS, where you can actually run Steam and use games. And you can actually, because I have tried it and used it a few years ago, 2-3 years ago. I had Steam installed on PC Linux OS and Ubuntu, and I can go from my Linux desktop to my Windows desktop, and all my games would be saved, and they would be at the exact same spot of the game where I ended off when I shut down the system or shut down my computer. So it's more versatile and compatible now with games, but still lagging behind Windows and probably Apple also. So that's con number 1. And then also with that, con number 2, because Linux, there's so many different versions of it, and there's so many different versions of Linux, which is good because, like I said, because of the different versions of Linux, it's hard to it's hard for virus writers to write for a certain version, but it's also difficult because there's no standard or unifying Linux system like there is in Windows and Apple. That a lot of the most popular software that you would use in Windows or Apple are not compatible with Linux, and that would be like, let me give you guys an example. So if you're a content creator, it might be difficult for you to use Linux because what's the most popular software in, I would say, Windows or Apple for creativity? It would probably be Adobe. So you don't get to, they don't have like Adobe's Photoshop or what's the other one for videos? Adobe Premiere. If you run a business or run office software, there's no like this app, Microsoft Office or whatever Apple uses. There's none of that. And right here, 7 things Linux users still can't do. This was in 2015, I think. There's a little slideshow that shows it. But let me give you guys the gist of it. Here we go. See? Your most popular software, Photoshop from Adobe. Adobe Premiere. Play serious games. There you go. My sentiments exactly. Back then, but I don't know now. Watch streaming video content. You can actually do that now. Trust me. I showed that in the my previous video. So go watch that. I'll put a link in the description. You can actually use Google Drive now, so that's a non-issue. iTunes, yeah, you still won't be able to use iTunes, at least not that I know of. There's probably a hack around that though in Linux. There's always a certain hack in Linux. Internet Explorer, but who wants to use Internet Explorer? I use Firefox or Chrome. And so yeah, so that's pretty much the negatives about using Linux. But there's more positives than negatives, like I said. And what you want to do too is go to Distrowatch. You go to Distrowatch right here, find the operating system or Linux distro that you're interested in, download it. And then from there, you don't even have to install it first. You could just use, that's another pro that I've failed to mention until up to now, is that you can download the operating or distro of your choice, burn it onto a CD or a DVD, depending on the size of the download, or a USB stick, and then reboot your computer and like set it in your BIOS to run off the CD, or to use the CD or the USB stick as the first like option it would use to look for an operating system. And then right there you can run it live off of the USB stick or your DVD or CD drive. You don't even have to install it yet. You can just run it off of what they call a live CD or a live USB system, and then run it and see how you like it before you even install it and wipe one of your hard drives to install Linux. So that's the beautiful thing too about using Linux, is that you can do that. So there it is, the pros and cons about using Linux. This probably went a little too long. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again soon for another video. Take care and have a great day.